Well, yes. Well, welcome everybody to the final panel of the day. Thank you very much for your patience. You'll all be pleased to know that in the time that it took to get this panel going, I managed to get my dinner on. So I'm very excited about the potential for me to be having dinner pretty promptly after this. So let's get cracking. This panel, it's obviously about investment, and it's a little bit about experiences from the front line, going out and actually getting some cash itself. So let's go and hear from some people who actually know what they're talking about, aside from me, George Osborn, Ukie's head of communications, who broadly knows what he's talking about when he's speaking to great people like Tara. Tara, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tara Reddy. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a studio called Loveshark. And we make camera games. So that's games for the mobile phone camera. And our target audience is teenage girls.
Fantastic. And Thomas, would you like to just give us a little bit of a background to what you're up to?
Yeah, so hi. So I'm Tomas Rawlings. I run an independent development studio based in Bristol. We do a mix of stuff. We make original IP. We work on partner projects, and we also do bits of work for hire as well as bits of publishing, and we work with publishers, so real range.
Fantastic stuff. So before we go into actually, getting some of your top tips, I think it's useful to actually just go and ask a little bit about the types of funding and finance that you yourself have actually managed to receive. So I'm going to jump back to Thomas very quickly and just go, what's been going on for you in terms of the kinds of funding and financing that Auroch Digital have been getting? There was some interesting news fairly recently about some funds that you had.
So just under a couple of years ago, we kind of completed our first round of funding, so the Series A funding. And so it was just under $500,000 of funding into the company. But prior to that, we have, received funding from a whole variety of things. The company's been going for 10 years, and over those 10 years, we've had grants, we've got, bits of funding from government pots of money, from local kind of innovation and enterprise pots of money. We've had project-specific investment, and then that final one, that Series A, was proper, the kind of full-on equity investment stuff. So over the years, we've done a bit of everything.
Of course. And Tara, what's been your experience?
So we've been around for about 2.5 years now, and we've done 3 rounds of funding. We've done angels and VC funding, and we've also had a couple of grants. So Innovate UK and UK Games Fund have both been grant funders for us as well.
Fantastic. And in terms of going out and actually finding and accessing that finance, how, first of all, did you actually go out and find that kind of stuff? And second, how did you decide what was right for your business at a particular time? I know that a lot of people who might be watching this might well be thinking, just any money. Yeah, that would be great. I mean, who doesn't love money, right? But surely one of the key things about actually going out and getting investment is finding the right pots. So how did you go and do that?
Would you like me to go?
Yeah, go for it, Tara. dive straight back in.
I think because basically we're building games that are built on new technology, so like machine learning and augmented reality. So they're quite innovative, and that means that they don't necessarily always already have like a built-in sort of monetization strategy. So we weren't really sure that we'd produce our first games and that would be a straightforward route to monetization. Because of that, for us, it was actually better to go down the route of, well, obviously grant funding is always amazing because, grant funding means that you get given the cash, but you actually don't give away any of your company, which is, like the golden type of funding. But, after the grant funding, for us, it worked to go for equity investment. So that was angels and VCs. Because we couldn't be sure that our games were going to monetize and support the studio, and also we need a lot of time to experiment and innovate, and that just meant that getting equity funding meant we could just get on with things and focus on that and not have to worry about doing work for hire or anything like that. So we could move as fast as possible, focus on innovation and testing out different types of game. And then how did we find it? Honestly, like at the start, it was really, really difficult. Myself and my co-founder, we came from a non-game background. So we'd worked in augmented reality. So we'd built social networks. We'd shipped a lot of apps before, but we weren't from games. So we came into the game industry and people were just like, well, who are you? And do you actually know what you're talking about? So honestly, at the start, I just talked to everyone that I could, got introduced to any angel investors I could. 90% of people didn't like what we're doing, didn't believe in what we were doing at the start. But what I found was that the important thing was to keep showing up. So, I kept going to game events, I kept meeting more and more people in the game industry. And eventually, we found a few people that actually started to sort of get what we're doing and believe. And once we got those first few investors, so they were angel investors, that made it a bit easier to get the next few contacts. Yeah. But yeah, it wasn't just a case of like, oh, I'm just going to get in touch with my black book, because we didn't really know anyone. So at the start, it was definitely a lot of perseverance. Over time, it's got much easier because now we've got a bit of a reputation. We know people, we already have existing investors. So then we've been able to go for more like referral, word of mouth type thing. But yeah, at the start, it was definitely like a lot of hustle.
A lot of hustle, and it was based though on really good understanding of what you were looking for and what was right for your business, right? It's just like you realize that some of those more traditional routes might not have actually worked out for you because of, as you mentioned, those potential issues around monetization and in terms of things like that. So you went in that direction. So Thomas, in terms of Auroch Digital, and in terms of the approaches that you've got into getting finance, how have you sort of adopted a sort of a similar approach? Have you looked in terms of funding on a sort of a project business by business basis, or what's been your approach to things?
In a way, I think some of what Tora talks about, the hustle, like that's just like, I would totally agree, it's so essential. Like you've just got to be there. Like, I think the ethos that I've sort of personally used is, if there's a pot of money there, then we're open to a conversation. So like I say, over the years, we've done a whole variety of stuff. And I think being our approach has been slightly different in that, and and more for circumstance rather than deliberately picking it. So we've kind of financed the business through work for hire and other things like that over the years, and that's both had its advantages and its disadvantages, and sort of not being able to necessarily focus on things we want to do is a big disadvantage to that. But yeah, I think just being prepared to be flexible with what you do, because I guess the way I think about it is like, a lot of people think, well, I've got this great idea for a game. If I can just make the money to make this game, then bang, I'll make the game and then the rest is money. The difficulty I think with that is the probability of success, especially if is so low with any individual game, that in a way it's like you're rolling a dice, like a D20, and you need a 20 to get enough to get sort of great success, or at least a kind of 15 to 19 to have enough to keep going. So the more times you get to roll that dice, the more chance you've got of hitting that big success. That the kind of, and whether that however you define that success to be, but ultimately the financial success is either the success to do what you want, or the success to kind of make build a bigger company, whichever those are. So yeah, I think it's super critical to be flexible about finding ways you can kind of re-roll that dice. And if taking a break and doing a kind of a work for hire contract gives you a chance to roll the dice again, if you do a game and it hasn't worked out, and then you manage to get a pot of money or a grant or do a crowdfunding thing that will allow you to do it, it's another chance to roll the dice. And the biggest thing that I found is, as a company, we accumulate experience about what worked and what didn't. We just get better at what we're doing. So anything that keeps your company moving forward and in the game, I think ultimately is worth looking at.
100%. And again, I think this touches to this idea that there's not actually that one size fits all approach to this. Every single business is going to have different approaches depending upon the size of the company, what you're aiming to achieve, what you're happy doing as well. I think that point about thinking about what you, as someone who might be running a business, or you as your sort of founding team, what you're comfortable doing and where you want to focus, it's going to help you understand, I think, really, really well where you're going to be trying to get your investment from. One of the, I think, particular things that a lot of people are always asking in relation to these kinds of things, it's about what exactly are people being asked for? What are you being asked for when you go into these kinds of conversations? What do investors actually need to see to be able to go and make the decision to back you? So Tara, what kind of things did you have to show? Especially interesting, of course, because you were saying that we might not actually be making money for a while. So what were they hoping to see?
I think the key thing is the team. So that's the first thing I think that investors always look at. It's like, who are the team? Have they done this before, or have they been successful before, or have they come from a really great studio that sort of like conveys that they're going to be very talented and experienced. I think I'm definitely like on the sort of like angel and VC side, they're looking for a vision about, where you see the market being in 5 years time. And, like a lot of I guess they want you to have like a different approach to everything else they're saying. So that's sort of like a unique vision. I think one thing that is really important is like I think you have to be an expert in something, and you have to really get that across. So like, what makes you and your company like stand out from everyone else? What do you know that other people don't know? For us, it was, we're building for teenage girls, and we've been working and building for that audience for 4 or 5 years now. So we just had such a deep knowledge of their behavior, their preferences, etc., that that other teams just didn't have. So I think, yeah, like finding what you're an expert at and leaning into that and really selling that as part of your pitch, that really worked for us.
That's fascinating as well, because my background's journalism, and I think one of the key things as well as a successful freelancer was always about finding your niche. Mine was football video games, but as a result of that, I used to get commissions from everywhere because I was the guy to go to speak about this kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to see that principle applies there as well. But and as well, going over to your perspective, Thomas, because I know as well that you've you've both obviously gone through things like grants. I think UK Games Fund as well, both of you as well. So in terms of your experience as well, and particularly seeming from the fact that you might be looking sort of less towards the future and more towards the now in terms of building your business and demonstrating it's been making money and generating revenue. What kind of things were investors looking for from you?
Well, I'd totally echo what Tara said about kind of vision, uniqueness. Just covered that brilliantly, and I found that as well. I think the other, and it's a truism, you hear loads and loads of investors, and you watch Dragon's Den or whatever, and they say, I'm investing in the person. And that was just massively my experience. Is sure, you've got ideas and all that kind of stuff, but if you don't make that connection with them, ultimately, remember, they've got this pot of cash. There's lots of people competing for that cash. And if they don't make that connection with you and think, I like this person, I want to give this person money, then all the numbers in the world aren't really going to add up to it. So that's what I found the person did. And then finally, I think the thing that surprised me going through the investment process is the numbers bit of it. Like, and maybe that was slightly different to us in like our investment pool. So we have a number of investors. Only one of those investors, which is an institutional investor, Miniclip. The rest of them were not specifically games. They were people who invested, high net worth people who invested in various things. So for us, we also had to kind of tell them about the industry, about everything like that. And for some of them, it was the first time they'd invested in a creative enterprise. So we kind of had to, give them a chance to ask. Not just, you can't just assume knowledge. So you start talking about Steam, and you start throwing acronyms around like EGS and stuff like that. You have to slow down and say, no, let's explain all this stuff. So I think it's important for them to know you, get to know you personally and trust you personally. And then second, important that what they know about, if you're pitching to one of these game funds around, great, they'll know all this stuff and makes your job a little bit easier. But if they don't, make sure you don't go over their head. Make sure you kind of give them a chance to explain.
I think that's a really interesting point, specifically at the moment, because, in terms of the last year, I think games has had a bit of a breakout year, especially off the back of everything that happened in relation to this wonderful pandemic that we're living through. But one of the offshoots of that, one of the positives for the industry, is a huge number of people who are outside of it, who maybe were aware of its potential value or aware of the businesses in there and who were succeeding, are now much more willing to go and take a closer look, but they still need help being guided in. So it's a really interesting point about actually sort of catering for those people who might be making their first steps into it. But I think just as well, just going back a little bit as well, back to those kind of like more sort of, shall we say, industry knowledgeable sources of funds. So something like the UK Games Fund, it's a great place for people who are starting out, when you're starting out with prototyping projects, as a way of going and getting funds. But what have been your experiences of applying for that? How did you find that process? And have you got any tips for anyone who might be going through it? I'm going to go to you first, Tara, if that's okay.
Okay, so something like UK Games Fund, I think one of the really important things is to show that, like, everyone that's applying to that has a really creative idea, and they've potentially got some like good game experience. But I think something that's really important to demonstrate when applying to that is your sort of like business acumen and your plan for what's actually going to happen with the game. I think a lot of people apply to these things and they're like, I've got a great idea, give me some money. But you have to show that, like, okay, what's the next step? What's your plan and what do you want to get to? And I think by demonstrating that, that's like the first thing that makes you stand out a lot. That's definitely sort of feedback that I heard when I've been applying to these sort of grants. So I think, yeah, just really don't dismiss the sort of like commercial side of things. But Innovate UK, it's a bit different. For Innovate UK, you need to show that you're using a new technology, you're innovating, and you're going to bring the UK forward, create jobs, etc. So again, it does actually get like quite commercial, and you have to be thinking quite big picture. So yeah, I guess for both of them, it's about like thinking outside the creative side as well.
Of course. And Thomas, your thoughts?
Yeah, so the UK Games Fund, we've been successful twice in that one, and that, you know, I would echo, like, I think too many people, when I've seen, you know, chatting informally with other developers through the Bristol Games Fund network, they're kind of going off and on writing tons of lore and world building. It's like, no, not only focus on the numbers of the business case, because it's public money and they want value for public money. Focus on that, thinking, okay, why is this value? Like, what jobs are you going to create? How are you going to build something out from that? Really focus on those aspects. And also, you know, do your work before to find out where you're going to send it to. You know, I think best case is you've got a game idea, you approach a potential publisher, you sound them out on the idea, get them to say that sounds interesting, stick that in the application. Like, yeah, I've been talking to so and so, they think this sounds cool. You know, make your pitch seem like you've done more than just write the thing out. Make it seem like you've done your homework as well.
Definitely. And, you know, I think in terms of the Games Fund, almost everyone I've spoken to about the Games Fund have spoken really positively about the experience as well, and in terms of getting hold of it. And what I will say as well for people in this chat as well, we have actually got the budget coming up in about a week or two. It's probably too late, but we have put in our budget submission for Ukie to try and encourage them to invest further into the Games Fund to make sure that there's more of this money available and supporting it. So if you're of that ilk and you are interested in that, it might be worth a little letter to your MP just to say how important the UK Games Fund is. It's all, every little helps. But speaking of something else that's been quite important in terms of financing games, and I think is something else that's particularly of interest to developers in the UK as well, is video game tax relief. Because video game tax relief, obviously, you know, in terms of the process, you're getting it on qualifying costs and things like that, and it tends to come after the process. But it's increasingly common for you to use services. I'm aware that Barclays, I think, actually offer this as well, where you're actually able to lend money against your expected VGTR certification because you've got that. I mean, how beneficial have you found VGTR? Have either of you been able to draw any benefit from it so far? So I'm going to go to Thomas first, just to go and flip things around, and then I'll come to you, Tara.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's been hugely beneficial. I mean, there's no doubt that we would not have grown how much we have grown without VGTR. And I think, especially given some of the you know, really awful tabloid headlines where they picked on a couple of cases, misconstrued it slightly, and made it seem like, you know, some really wealthy company was just getting money for free. For us as a small developer, VGTR means jobs. It's absolutely created jobs. And so for us, you know, we get some money from the government, you know, as a tax back, and obviously we're paying lots of tax in PAYE and all these other sort of things as well. And then that goes back into new projects, goes back into growth, does exactly what it's intended to do, which it helps build our industry out. It helps invest in people and in skills. So for us, it's been absolutely essential. And, you know, I think it's great. I know you've been lobbying the government on this and keeping it as, you know, as other organizations and companies have. I think it's an essential part of the kind of financial infrastructure of our industry.
Tara, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's the same for us. I mean, it's especially right at the start when cash flow was like extremely tight. Just that little bit of relief and extra cash was fantastic. And yeah, I mean, I can't really say more. I echo Thomas. It's a fantastic scheme. It really, really helped us, and it has allowed us to expand our team and create more. So yeah.
Fantastic. And yeah, and one of the key things is do make sure you check out places like the BFI and take a look at this scheme itself. You know, as they say, it's not necessarily easy to apply for it. You know, it's not going to just be the case that they're going to write you a blank check. But if you're organised and you go and look through the criteria, you're well placed to qualify, especially as it is a British business. You should score a lot of points in terms of where your staff are based and quite probably in terms of a lot of the thematic side of things as well.
I just want to add as well, like the BFI people are so helpful. Like they're super helpful at helping you understand what you've got to fill in and everything like that. And, you know, yeah, there's a bit of admin in it, but relative to the return you get, it's so worth it. It really is.
Fantastic. And so just to round things off, because I appreciate we're slightly overrunning in terms of time, and there's some great networking coming up. Have you got any final tips, either of you, in terms of people looking at to go and get investment at this moment in time? I'm going to work my way back to Tara on this one. So Tara, what are you thinking?
Okay, so I think The first would be try to find, like, partner with people that have the same values as you. So I think that always helps in the long run, whether that's your co-founder, whether that's your investors, etc. Like, I do think if you've got a bit of a funny feeling, it's often better to keep shopping around. And I would say, like when we started, we wanted to like raise like a big seed round, like off the bat, and that just like realistically, it didn't happen, right? We had to do it in chunks over time. We did 3 rounds over 2.5 years. And what I would sort of say is, like, I think a realistic goal is to look for like sort of little validation milestones. Like, our first thing that sort of validated us as like, a real company was Apple did a big feature of one of our games. Great. We had some hype, we had some momentum. We did we did a small raise then we could move on, and get further forward. So I think, don't be afraid to be flexible, and look for those little bits of validation and raise based on those.
Fantastic. And Thomas, just to round things off.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at individual investors, then that EIS certification is absolutely critical. That makes it for them. It makes it a much lower risk investment. There's a bit of admin involved in doing that. And, we found that with the individual investors, there was such a key question that they asked that you just want to go and get that certification. Like, just get it anyway. Like, there's a bit of admin involved in doing it, but get that certification right from the get-go. And if you're going for EIS, it's a bit more admin, still. So I would say that that's the kind of most important thing. And then the second thing is, like, have robust numbers you put in front of people, and paint the picture of the scenario. You don't want to be unrealistic. You don't want to say, like, well, Among Us sold this much, so our little game will sell probably about half at least of what Among Us sold. Be realistic about the numbers, because if they interrogate them, you've got to be able to defend them. But at the same time, be positive about that. We would often put multiple scenarios, like, okay, this doesn't go well, it'll be here. If it goes all right, it'll be here. But if it goes really well, it'll be here. And if it goes nuts, because that does happen, it'll be here. Present the possibilities, but have a vision, and like, you're going for that. The numbers have gone absolutely nuts and fantastic.
Fantastic. And I think one of the key things for me here, sort of to summarize it all in terms of what we've been talking about, there's the hard work, do your networking, there's the understanding, what your business is all about and what kind of funding you're going to need. But then also making sure that you put in the groundwork in terms of doing that admin that can make you a more intriguing prospect to invest in, making sure that you know your numbers inside out and you can understand them so that you can explain them to someone, but then making sure you don't forget that you still need that vision and personality as well. As you said earlier, Thomas, you can have all the numbers in the world, but if people decide that they're not that keen in terms of investing in you, you might find it a little trickier. So, go and work on those virtual handshakes. I think that's one of the key things right now. So I think we're going to tie things off there. So I think we'll hand back to Leon, who should be